Let's continue our conversation with Terri Austin now in New York. And Terri, the number that comes to mind is one that I have been following now for the past 3 decades. There are 330 million firearms in this country. And every time we have these discussions, gun sales go through the roof. White America has armed itself to the teeth, afraid that Black America is one day going to come knocking on the doors. We see militias going to the state house in Michigan. We see people dressing in military fatigues. Law enforcement departments in small town America have tanks. They have weapons of war. So what happens if all of a sudden there is that explosion, that powder keg decides it wants to go off?
Listen, don't get me going on gun control. This is my view.
That's why I asked the question. I want to get you going on gun control.
I wish that we lived in New Zealand. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern took away all of the military-style weapons after they had a mass shooting. And guess what? There haven't been any other mass shootings. And not only did she say that they will be banned, she went and she took them away for those who already held them. And here's my view. You can have a gun to go hunting, maybe even a gun to protect your home. But why on God's earth do we need assault weapons that are, for wars, frankly, when you can have rapid fire and you can have multiple shootings at the same time where many people are killed with these mass shootings? So my view on guns is the less we have, the better. And I do believe in the Second Amendment. I think you have a right to carry a gun, but frankly, I don't think that we need these assault weapons. And I think that if that number that you quoted, it does include these assault weapons. Those are the types of guns that we don't need. And look, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need guns at all.
So speak to me as somebody living in New York to somebody living in Iowa. And they say, I watch the news every night and there are people being shot on your streets and I see them being dragged and handcuffed and they're violating crime. So you can't paint this rosy picture because sooner or later, that guy is going to come knocking on my door in Iowa and I want to be able to defend myself. Would you please explain to white America in Idaho and Utah and North and South Dakota and Montana and Iowa that you really don't care about knocking on their door?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, one of the questions that I ask is, when is the militia going to come to your door and you are going to need all of these weapons to fight them off? I mean, look, in those states that you just mentioned, you don't have the statistics of crime. And so one could argue that you don't need all of these guns. But even here in New York, if you took some of those guns off of the street and took them out of the hands of those individuals who might use them adversely to the community, we would have less of a need to have guns to protect ourselves. Sadly, the number of shootings has gone up this year in New York City. And I'm not sure if that is because of the police force or I don't know what, frankly, is going on in New York. And I think we have to take a look at that and look at that closely. And I think de Blasio is going to take a look at that. But I do think that we need to focus on the community, because you need to address, why are people using these guns? If you're sticking up a bodega and you need food, then let's address that issue. Maybe there's a way to fund the community so people have the basic needs that they need to survive. So I do think it's a refocus.
And a bodega, for that person in Iowa or Oklahoma that is watching, is a convenience store. I think you know them as 7-Elevens. When I moved to New York for a short period of time, they kept saying, go down to the bodega. And I'm like, why? I want to get something to drink. But that's a story for another day. But before I let you go, is it possible to have a movement that says Black Lives Matter without then going to the issue of guns?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, Black Lives Matter is all about making sure that whites understand that we are human beings. And I don't think we need to talk about guns, because Black Lives Matter is not saying we're going to come and we're going to shoot up the community and we're going to force police to leave us alone. They are simply saying, treat us as human beings, treat us equally. do unto us as we would have you do to yourself.
Terri Austin in New York City, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.